This is a special broadcast. Something is happening. The Bridge. People from north, south, east, and west. Men, women, and children. Rediscovering long-lost visions and dreams. Connecting and reconnecting.
Yeah, welcome to this first live edition and video of the Bridge podcast. And we've been talking about lots of stuff happening around, trying to bridge people together, atheists, religious people, Christians, all around the world, trying to make sure that we come to real understanding. I think the world lacks today getting the truth and understanding facts so that kids, youths, even older people can actually make up their mind on how to live their lives. There's so much confusion now. And this is the time for clarity. It's the time for us to talk about what really is the truth. What are the evidences? And now, and this podcast is the platform for that. I have today with me someone that is called, in many ways, a revolutionary. Now, I got to meet with him recently, and this is his first time visiting Nigeria, and we thought, as the Bridge, we need to have a close talk with him.
Come on.
You're welcome here.
Thank you, bro.
Yes.
Thank you. Honor to be with you.
It's good to see you today. So, can we meet you?
My name is Jason Dimitry, and it's my first time in Nigeria. Incredible experience. It's been an honor and pleasure to be here with you. We've been here for a week, and it has been life-changing. And I'm visiting from Los Angeles, California, where I lead a church that's a mother church to what is now becoming a movement of churches that is spanning the globe, and it's pretty exciting. But we lead a church there in Los Angeles, and the title of our church and churches is the Restored Church Worldwide.
Wow.
And so we're here to establish the Restored Church in Lagos, which is very exciting. And also really exciting is we just kicked off, we have a benevolent arm to our organization called Care Global, and we just kicked off our first signature project, which is a school here in Lagos that is a primary school for about 100 students. And so it's really, really awesome. I was able to go there yesterday, and that was really life-changing, amazing, and heartwarming to see the way we can help out. And, so that's a little bit of what we are about and what we're doing here in Nigeria.
Wow, it's great to hear that. So you say you started just something new, something to capture Christianity and all of that. Please, can you tell us what exactly that you are bringing to the table?
Yeah, I mean, I think, my spiritual roots go back to what is known as the Restoration Movement. And this started in the early 19th century. And so you have the church in the Bible there's only one church in the Bible, right? And there was a very clear understanding of what it meant to be a follower of Jesus Christ and what it meant to convert under the covenant that Christ brought. Right. And there wasn't confusion on that. I mean, confusion started to come into the church in the first century, and this is where you get a lot of the writings of the New Testament. We call them the epistles. They're writing back to a churches that were set up during about a 40-year time period, and they're telling them to watch out for this, don't embrace that, look out for this. And it was a lot to deal with, just false teachings that were trying to infiltrate the church. Right. That's really the spirit and theme to reason why the letters were written, for the most part. Now, what we saw happen over the last 2,000 years is we've seen one church with a very clear understanding, now splintered into literally 50,000 different churches and variations and doctrines and concepts of what it means to be a Christian, what it means to be a follower of Christ. And so in the early 19th century, after seeing what we call denominationalism flourish in the 18th and 17th and 16th centuries, there was a group of people go, wow, we've lost so much of what Christianity is supposed to be. We've lost so much of what primitive Christian doctrine is, and they saw it in themselves, and they said, we need to not reform, we need to restore. We need to go back to what did the Bible actually teach, what was the church actually like, and live that way. And that gave birth to what is now known as the Restoration Movement. But then that, of course, splinters into different groups with varying opinions on different things. And we were a part of a group that was a Restoration Church. Back to being a Christian meant that you were going to be a disciple.
Right.
Because there were synonyms within the scriptures.
Right.
And that was a very controversial teaching, because I could walk down the street and ask 10 different people, hey, are you a Christian? And maybe 8 of them say, yeah. You're going to get 8 different understandings or thoughts or experiences on what that actually means.
Right.
But then if you go, okay, the word Christian is a disciple biblically, the Bible teaches very specifically what it means to be a disciple. Now we can kind of define and not go off of what the word of mouth is on what these things are, but we could biblically define New Testament Christianity and discipleship. And so that was kind of the message, to take that message around the world of what it means to be a true follower of Jesus, which was widely lost in mainstream religious society today. But I think in that effort, it came to be a point where I myself saw that it had drifted from that message, and drifted not just from the doctrine of the Bible, but the church of the Bible. And so last year, me and a group of like-minded men and women, we decided that we needed to start a new group that was going to uphold these original convictions and cultures that we see in the Bible and we had seen in at times in our fellowship that was lost. And we started an initiative, we called it the Restored Church.
So just to cut in there, so you mean the restored church, you talked about getting back to restoration. So the whole idea of restoring, specifically, how do you define that biblically? Because we see a lot of churches today. We see the Catholic Church that has been around for as far back as, you know, and then we see the Anglicans, we see Baptist churches, and a whole lot of Christian denominations today. Catholic Church counts about 1.2 to 3 billion.
Yeah.
When we talk about restoration, how does it now affect these established churches that already exist?
Well, I mean, again, I think that Christianity does stand alone in world religions. One, in its variety, right? So you could go to Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and you're going to find a couple different sects of those, different variations of them. But then you come to Christianity, you find 50,000 variations of it. And for some people, this devalues Christianity. For me, it validates it.
Right.
Because one, the New Testament, when it talked about the future church, in say 2 Timothy 4, says there will come a time when men will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they'll gather around them a great number of teachers that will say what their itching ears want to hear. And here Paul, in his last writings, is speaking about the church that he laid his life down for, literally was martyred for eventually. He says the future of that church is going to become very twisted.
Right.
And it'll be turned into all these different teachers that are just going to say what you want to hear. And it then commands Timothy to not lose his head and to keep sound doctrine, right? And now we're thousands of years from that writing, and we've seen it lived out perfectly. So it validates Christianity for me, because it's what the Bible actually said would happen.
Right.
And if the Bible is true, and Jesus was the Messiah and the Savior of the world, and there was forces that were trying to prevent people from finding that salvation, one of the greatest things you could ever do to try and keep them from it is to muddy it so much to where people really don't know where to start or what to do.
Right.
And that's a lot of our religious society today. And I think it does have to start with doctrine.
Right.
And that's what it says. It says people will not put up with sound doctrine. So if there's sound doctrine in the Bible, then there is also misapplication of the Bible or false doctrine of the Bible. I've heard people say, well, as long as your church teaches the Bible, then it's okay.
Right.
No, I mean, there's a false way of representing the Bible. There's a missed way of representing the Bible. This could be done with evil intentions. It could be done through ignorance, but nevertheless, it leads you to a path that is not emblematic of what we see in the Bible.
Right.
Both taught and then the lifestyles of those who are actually in the New Testament. So it has to start with doctrine.
Right. Do you actually see the current world as actually believing that they could have gone astray, the current Christendom today? How do you see perpetrating this whole revolution, I call it, of restoration? How do you see the world taking that today?
Well, I think we live in a time of inclusivity, right?
Okay.
Everybody needs to be included. And anytime you exclude anybody, it's wrong, right? So we live in a world that doesn't like that, doesn't like exclusivity. It's one of the reasons why Christianity was always persecuted, was because they believed there was one God.
Right.
And that excluded all those who believed in other gods.
Right.
And so one of the major controversial points about Christianity as a religion, as a doctrine, as a theology, is that it was exclusive, right? So now we live in a time where, Christians understand that, or people who subscribe to Christians understand that there's only one way to the Father, and that's through the Son. But Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He didn't say I'm the ways and the truth and the life.
Right.
So the sharpness of it is not only is there only one way to the Father, and that's through Jesus, but there's only one way to really follow Jesus. And what we've seen happen in our mainstream religious society is embracing the culture of our world and, the byproduct of denominationalism, which is right. I mean, you can't make people be Christians or this and that. There needs to be a separation of church and state. But the backlash of that, or the knock-on effect of that, is you have denominationalism, where it goes, well, if I like your church, I'll go to your church, and if I like his church, I'll go to his church, and if I don't like his, I won't go to his. And it became more of a preference piece to what aligns with my thinking, what aligns with my lifestyle, what aligns with what my parents like, versus what does the Bible actually teach, and conforming to that and not having the Bible conform to us. So what we've seen is a conformity of the scriptures into our times, instead of a restoration of our times into the scriptures. And so this will always be rejected by the masses for the most part. True biblical doctrine will always be at odds with the majority. It will always be a minority that are willing to accept it and go, okay, this is what the Bible teaches, and regardless of what my mainstream culture teaches me, this is what it says, and I have to be willing to be at odds with that to accept this. So it's the gospel is generally rejected in its pure form.
Right.
Yeah.
That takes me to a very interesting part of Christianity, which, of course, when we read the Bible and we particularly look at the book of Acts, we see an incredible growth from the book of Acts, and from the opening of the kingdom of God. We see a massive number of disciples, people baptized on that day, and we see the growth across the pages of the book of Acts.
Yeah.
Now, with the current infiltration of religion and just the growing demographics of the youths, people not reading their Bibles, and do you see this kind of Christianity, the one we see in the book of Acts, do you see it really being successful in this current generation?
I think it can and it must be, but I think another couple dynamics we've seen infiltrate Christendom today is, one, the concept of spectatorism. Right. So we're in Nigeria. Okay. What is the most loved sport? Would it be soccer?
Soccer.
Soccer, right?
Soccer, yeah.
And people love to spectate. They love to go to, huge stadiums and cheer for their teams, and then go home. And we've seen the concept of spectatorism infiltrate the concept of being a follower of Jesus. So we do see churches that can get big, and we live in the time of like the mega church, right? But it's widely infused with the concept of being a spectator. That you go to the service on Sunday, you spectate, even zealously, but then you go home. And there's very little understanding of what you believe from the Bible. And there's very little of a lifestyle that is emblematic of the people that we read about in the Bible. Even though it talks about in 1 John, it says, this is how we know who are in him. Whoever claims to be in him must walk as Jesus did. So it's a very clear message. Jesus said, if you hold to my teachings, you're really my disciples. You're really a Christian. But we live in a time, we've built a society where we feel completely at home and going somewhere, subscribing to it, spectating it, cheering for it, but not really knowing what it is or living like it. And so I do believe you could see a number, there could be a great number in a church, but you don't see a world impact the way you see in the book of Acts. They didn't just have numbers, but they were a sweeping geographical movement that was able to change people's lives and change the society of their day so much that by the time you get towards the end of their time period, the way to describe their impact was they turned the world upside down. It says that in Acts 17. So we don't see that same type of impact. I don't think people generally look at society today and go, wow, like it's really getting better. I think most people look at society today and they go, it's getting worse and it's getting worse. And we see what's happened to even our own personal families. And I don't think that speaks to a sweeping movement of true Christianity that is tearing the world upside down.
It's funny you mentioned that, because your name happens to appear in Acts chapter 17 verse 6. And I believe that your parents actually gave you that name on purpose, because getting involved in the restoration movement at this critical time, when we see the world going really quagmire with so many infiltrated ideas, you need a revolution to be able to bring them back to primitive Christianity. Can you tell us, when you were taking off in this new movement that you have, some kind of radicalness and revolutionary attitude you needed to have to get this going?
I think I'm grateful for the influence that many people have had in my life, and a lot of different materials and to read and understand, most of which, of course, the Bible. And I think that I would say in 2010, there was, I think for me personally, just a deeper realization to the fact that if we want to claim to be followers of Jesus, that our lives have to look like the people in the Bible. Not some 21st century spin on it. I mean, obviously we have our culture today, and it's gonna, there's a certain amount of truth to that, but the impact, the doctrine, the spirit, all of that, it must be emblematic. And I was part of a church, and I said, I'm a part of this church. I always said for many years, that I was part of for about 20 years, I said, I'm a part of this church because I look at the Bible and I look at my church, and there's a sameness. And anytime I look at my church and I look at the Bible and there's not a sameness, then I have to be willing to leave to start something that would be like that. And I don't think that's something that should be done lightly. And I think there was many attempts to try and call for restoration and call for revival and call to renew that revolutionary spirit that we all began with. But after many attempts of that, and there being an unwillingness to listen to that message, and instead an animosity towards that message, it became quite clear to preserve primitive Christianity, and this is what Jesus talks about. You can't take new wine and put it into an old wineskin.
Absolutely.
You ruin both the wine and the wineskin. But if you are to preserve new wine, then you have to put it into a new wineskin and not an old one. And we realized that we were in that situation, and we had to then come out and be preserved to have a chance to have a movement that would sweep the nations in a generation. So I think it comes from just, a biblical understanding that we have to actually live like these people. I look at the first century church, I don't see decent people who went to church.
Right.
I don't see that. I see a group of people who count their lives worth nothing to them. That they're willing to, go anywhere, do anything, give up everything. They're willing to really live this radical, revolutionary life to seek and save a lost world, which was exactly what Jesus did.
Right.
That he came to earth on a mission to lay down his life, and by doing so become a vessel of salvation for all who would then imitate that.
Right.
Not just subscribe to it.
Right.
Not just go, I believe you did that, and I'm acknowledging what you did,
Right.
and therefore I'm somehow through osmosis saved in that. No, that I'm now going to live that and pay that forward,
Right.
and through that there could be a domino effect
Right.
of one man laying down his life who then affects another person who lays down his life, who then can multiply and create a sweeping movement that can have a global generational impact. And I am grateful to some of the groups that I had the privilege of being a part of at certain time periods that had that on straight and saw the effect of it happen in a very short period of time. But sadly, the nature of man is to drift and drift and drift and drift and drift. And then hopefully at some point somebody takes up that banner and goes, no, we got to restore, we got to go back. And that's the whole premise of what we're trying to do.
Wow. So when you started this revolution, give us an idea of the kind of numbers you're talking about that you have then, and it's how old now?
It's almost a year.
Almost a year.
So we're about 2 weeks from our anniversary service.
So we're talking about 1 year anniversary coming soon.
Yeah.
So give us an idea what numbers are we talking about when we took off, and where are we right now?
Well, I was leading a kind of the mother church of a group of churches.
Right.
And it was about 1,200 members.
Okay.
And we knew that once we took this stand that it would create what the Bible would call or subscribe to as godly division.
Right.
There'd be some people who would want to do it, and there'd be some people who did not want to return
Right.
to that type of Christianity or to that Christianity. And so we went down to about 700 within that church, and then there was a handful of other churches that joined us. There was a total of 10 churches
Right.
that joined us, 9 in the States and 1 outside the United States in
Right.
Manila, Philippines. And and we together were about 1,500 disciples.
Okay.
So we started with 1,500, spread amongst 10 churches.
Okay.
And we didn't know what would happen. We didn't know, would we even have the finances, or we just knew that it was biblical and it's right, and that we'd reached a point where we felt the Bible had mandated us to do it.
Right.
So now 1 year later, we started to see churches want to join.
Right.
And we had several churches in Africa join us, who were part of the group that we came out of.
Right.
These were ministers who were leading whole churches, and they experienced some of what we experienced,
Right.
where they took a stand and said, this is what we want to do, and some of the members did not want to do that, and
Right.
some did, and those who joined, we immediately saw the impact that you start to see in the Bible. It's amazing. I mean, Jesus made it very clear in John 15, and this is a through line of the whole Bible, that he said, if you remain in me and my words remain in you.
Right.
So that's the challenge. the historic challenge to humanity and those who would seek a relationship with God, would they remain in God? And that would mean that his words remained in them. The byproduct of that radical accomplishment is a revolution of impact, right? So once we got to a group that was totally united in that, we saw an immediate, incredible expansion for 1 year time period. We saw that 10 churches multiplied now into 22 churches. That have now, we have 4 churches in Africa, including the one we just established here in Lagos, Nigeria. And from here, we actually go on this week to have the inaugural service to a church in Abidjan as well. And all the groups have grown substantially. So the church in LA, we started the Restored Church with 700 members. It's now approaching 1,100 members in a year's time. The churches in Africa all pretty much doubled the amount, and the churches in America grew substantially as well, to where we started with 1,500, we're now at about 2,500.
Wow.
And so it was a geographical expansion like we see in the book of Acts, and a numerical growth like we start to see in the book of Acts as well. And so it's really incredible to see what's happened in a year's time, but now we have a critical mass that needs to grow, and we'll see what happens in the years to come. That if we stay on the growth, trajectory that we're in now, it's something that will have a generational impact.
Wow. When we talk about how you left and the revolution and the radicalness, and you mentioned something quite interesting, godly division. Some people see division never godly. Some people always have the negative connotation, like in Galatians 5:19-21, it talks about, division, factions, dissension. But how would you clearly, in an environment where the main body that used to be, we always want to clamp down the smaller group that they always call them, initially it's probably called a faction, and then in Catholic Church, we have Catholic Charismatic Anglican Church, we have the AFAC, even the Catholic Church itself, we had Anglican that came out of Catholic Church. So I'm sure they did not initially embrace the breaking up, but with time. When do you call a break off that may initially be a form of negative impact? Because of course the boldness it takes, the radicalness that it takes may bring some shock waves to some that don't initially have that kind of. How do you make someone comfortable about a break off and to see it from God's point of view? Because today it's easier to call it godly division, it's not godly, it's a rebellion. How do you bring this home so that those who have the kind of boldness, because I see people like Phineas in the Bible, they go off to do what God wants. I see Barnabas in the Bible. I mean, the other people, like, they don't want to welcome Paul, but Barnabas went. I see him going to Tarsus to look for Saul. I don't think the Bible asked him to go there to look for Saul. I see people doing things that the Spirit of God led them. But today, people want to look at it from negative. How do you explain this?
I mean, I think that one, we have to establish that the general concept that not all unity is good. Right? So God would not call us to be united with criminals. Right? So that gives us the general concept that not all unity is good. In fact, the word holy means to come out and be set apart. Right? So it describes division in that. Like I think most things, then you got to go within the world of Christendom, right? Because we understand, okay, I can't be like the people in the world or this or that. I got to come out and be holy. I got to be divided from them. But how does it work within Christendom? So not all unity is good. Not all division is bad, because there's a healthy form of it. How does it work within those who would say that they subscribe to Christianity?
Right.
Well, one, we'd go, if there is no concept of it ever being godly to divide within the world of Christendom, then we should all go back to the Catholic Church.
Right.
Because it's been dividing for 1700 years.
Right.
And why did it divide? It divided at times because of some were just evil things in the sense that it was about power and position and geography and things like that.
Right.
But a lot of times it was a stance for what they felt was a better doctrine or wrong doctrine or different things like that. And so what biblically would make it permittable? Would it make it righteous and not wickedness?
Right.
To separate from a group and start something new? And it's an extremely fair question, and I think it demands an answer. I think first off, it's not something that should be taken lightly.
Right.
I think it's something that has to be done within the parameters of the Bible. And I can say, and I'm grateful for a group of people around me, and that I get to be partnered with, and we were very serious about it being within the realms of the Scriptures and permitted by that. For me, it comes down to two different issues. It comes down to life, and it comes down to doctrine, right? Our life and our doctrine are equally important. You can have all the right biblical doctrine of the Bible, but if you do not live it out, then that is not something that is going to save you. Right. And we would just call that hypocrisy, right? Jesus' half-brother James made it clear about that. It says, if you listen to the word and you don't do what it says, then there's a vanity to that. It's worth nothing, right? So we can have all the right biblical doctrine, but if you don't live it out, then it's not something that's going to get you to heaven. Right. But on the other side of that coin, you can have a good life, but if you in the way that the world would say is a good life, it's a good moral person or a good Christian person, as we would mainstream society say that, but it doesn't match biblical doctrine. Right. It's rooted in false teaching. Well, that can't save you either. So what would be the issues that would permit creating division and stepping out to do something new? Is it have to be a life and doctrine. It'd have to be a drifting of these two things to the point where it becomes incurable. It talks about it we see this throughout the Bible. The basic premise of the whole Bible, from Adam and Eve, to the book of Revelation, is that God gives us his words. If we compromise them, then he's going to separate himself from us at some point. At some point. Now, God is merciful and patient and tries to get our attention and all that, but at some point God will remove himself from his people who are no longer with their God. So it's really, we separate ourselves from God, and then at some point God acknowledges that. So we see that with Adam and Eve, who did not listen to God's word and were then banished from the garden. We see it all the way to the book of Revelation, where Jesus inspires these letters written back to the churches in their time and telling them, if you don't repent and do the things you did in the beginning, I'm going to remove my lampstand from you, showing that my presence is no longer with you because you are no longer with me. We see this with the burning and destruction of the temples, which was supposed to be the very presence of God on earth. It was where heaven and earth was supposed to overlap, and that's where God was, and God allowed them to be destroyed to show that he wasn't there for so long. He had removed himself from that, and the destruction symbolized that removal. So it goes all throughout the Bible, even into, like the parable of the tenants there in Matthew, and where he says God gives his vineyard to his people, but if they don't do what he requires of them, he will take it from them and give it to another person, right? So when do you hit that level, right? When do you hit that? I think it does go down to a lot of what is taught in 2 Chronicles 36, where it says God sent messengers to his people time and time again, but they refused to listen to them, until there was no remedy, right? And the cure would have been a willingness to listen, like in the book of Revelation, where Jesus is calling them back to do the things they did in the beginning. A willingness to listen to that message from God's word.
Right.
And what made it incurable was an unwillingness to listen. So we took great stakes to make sure that we felt that we made every effort to be unified, and that we could say that we were those messengers that went time and time again to show the driftings of sound life and doctrine that were having a systemic effect amongst, a whole group of churches that was very clear and was widely seen. And those attempts to call back, like you see most of the time in the Bible, when an establishment, religious establishment becomes drifted, they usually take it at great offense to those who call them back.
Right.
And that was taken at great offense. And even at those offenses, there was still a repetitive nature to it that we felt we had to come time and time and time again to where we got to a point where it was now going to hurt the chances of having a movement that could be emblematic of the book of Acts to try and stay. And we felt that we met the biblical requirements to then use the doctrine of godly division, and that's what we then did.
I know that in the Bible, when we look at the pages, we see radical men that really addressed and challenged the status quo. In fact, at one point in the Bible, in Acts chapter 4, it talked about them being unschooled, ordinary men.
Yeah.
But the leaders of the religious society then were acknowledging them as powerful men and acknowledging their being with Jesus Christ because of the power and the wisdom of what they came up with. But we also know at the same time they were locked in the prison. At the same time we got beaten up.
Yeah.
So if you want to be a revolutionary, you've got to expect those things.
Yeah.
And history tells us that most of those guys, they died as martyrs.
Yeah.
What for you has been the greatest threat or the greatest challenge in this revolution that you began?
No doubt immediately when we did this, there was a great ostracizing and demonizing.
Right.
Which is the same thing that happened to Jesus. That goes throughout the Bible as well. We understood that would happen. It was sad, I think nothing was ever personal. It was never a personal thing. We love everybody, right? As a disciple, we love everybody, right? Whether you're with me or you're even against me, I still love you, right? It's sad to see that type of loss of relationship, but we understood that came with it. I think the greatest threat to it would be, it's just, I think in our modern times, we look at the Bible and again, people subscribe to it, but subscribing to it and living it out are totally different things.
Right.
And when you kind of put yourself in that arena where you go, okay, we're going to practice the Bible this way, you start to see the things that happen in the Bible happen to you. And you start to see persecution, you start to see a lot of slandering, you start to see a lot of, like I said, demonizing, gossip, this and that. And we started to see a lot of that happen. And for me, that didn't really bother me all that much because I thoroughly understood that would happen before we did it. But for, I think, a lot of people who came with, that could be a very turbulent thing to go through. So I think there was definitely this was a storm. It was a storm of loss. It was a storm of being persecuted. It was a storm of being condemned. It was a storm of these types of things, which I think all God allowed to happen, because what it has done is it has forged a group of disciples who completely understand why and what they did and have deep convictions about it. And I think God has now used that to be a foundation of leadership that we're seeing a great advancement of the gospel through. So I think that was just the storm of it was definitely difficult. I think ultimately the greatest threat to it is not from what we came out from, but just the journey that's ahead. I think every new initiative faces the same challenges that maybe the last initiative drifted far because of. We have the challenge of how do we get to all nations in a generation? How do we raise up a leadership team that can sustain that? And how do we just personally in our lives never let ourselves compromise? Those are the greatest challenges, and that really has nothing to do with where we came from,
right,
and everything to do with where we want to go.
That's right.
And so Jesus made it very simple. If you remain in me, which means my words remain in you, you will bear much fruit. If we keep our life and doctrine straight, if we remain in Jesus and his words remain in us, we will bear much fruit. We will save our hearers. We will see a Book of Acts experience in the 21st century as we try and restore Christianity around the world. Yeah.
You know, I know that when you look at the Bible, Jesus didn't just drop Christianity here and then go back to heaven and expect things to pop up. You know,
Sure.
It came with a message for the kingdom, and it came with strategy. He had disciples that he brought to be close to him, and then he had another circle of disciples. Do you kind of have a strategy that you believe is sustainable with this new revolution?
Yeah, I mean, I think every company that's been able to scale understands Jesus' strategy. We're not trying to steal it from the corporate world. The corporate world stole it from the Bible. And the reason why is because it works. It really is the only way to scale and to have, one group turn into 2 and then 4 and 8 and go on. And is that you have to grow, right? It comes down to 2 things. You have to grow, and then you have to build a leadership infrastructure that can sustain that growth. This is what we see lived out and defined in Jesus' ministry. Jesus spent time healing the poor, feeding the poor and helping the poor and healing the sick. And so after a period of time, they could go somewhere and replicate that which they came from. And that's how you can scale and get all over the world. And it's something that, McDonald's has figured out. It's something that Starbucks has figured out. It's something that Domino's has figured out, that you have to be able to replicate what happened before, and that takes resource of people, it takes resource of leadership, and the church has to operate that same way if we want to be able to get all over the world.
Right. Jason, there's something else that I noticed, and I think it's a feeler that I got from one of your latest sessions you handled during your stay here in Nigeria, is how appealing you are and how transparent you are in breaking things down and letting people know simply how it all develops. How important, because this is endearing to people. I mean, people were like that guy. How important do you think in a society like this that is shrouded so much mystery and
Sure.
darkness and people not being accountable for church money and leaders being, greater than thou, higher than thou, holier than thou. How important do you see the place of transparency in leading churches in this revolution today?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you take it from a biblical standpoint, in God there is light and there's no darkness at all. And in that is also, if we walk in the light, we'll have fellowship with each other. So what builds a fellowship, what builds a friendship, what builds a unity is transparency, right? Is being honest and open. I felt something that I did not want to imitate from groups that I've been a part of in the past is that there was such an emphasis on role and title and position. And I saw Jesus as he goes, hey, I no longer call you my servant, but I call you my friends. And here's God who literally created mankind. And he put himself down in a position where he's friends with them. And I'm sure that was lived out in a very normalized human way. Like he laughed with these people, he joked with these people. They probably teased each other. There was an incredible camaraderie and friendship to where they felt the looseness with Jesus to ask sometimes ridiculous questions. Who would be the greatest? Who this? But they also felt a respect and reverence for who he was as well. And Jesus was able to masterfully have these dichotomies of authority and friendship and different things like that. And I just think that these are trademarks that we try and embrace. I think Satan works through silence, and just distance and silence is enough for Satan to work, even when there's nothing to do.
Right.
And so I think in seeing this and leading churches and having relationships with people and trying to raise up leaders and commissioning them and then working with them beyond that, I saw the best policy is just to have to be transparent. Tell people what you're doing and tell them why you're doing it and how you're doing it. And generally people agree with it when they understand it from the Bible. I think when we're trying to hold on to things or there's a lack of light in our own lives, that's when we start to have, ways of dealing with people. We're trying to control narratives and we're trying to, have, careful messaging and we're all this. And I found the best thing to do is set forth the truth plainly. As it says in Corinthians, you'll commend yourself in the conscience of all men. And I've never not had that work at this point. It takes work to do it. Because you have to be willing to be honest. Sometimes it's easier to not be honest.
Right.
You have to have open discussion, and you have to be willing to let people share things with you.
Right.
And be okay in that type of environment and not feel threatened by it. Right. And I think sometimes people can feel threatened by that.
Right.
Why? I think that's a whole different discussion. But
Right.
I've just seen that create a lack of just being open and transparent and being friends. And I look at the wonderful cast of characters that I have the privilege of leading, and I don't see myself as so removed from them. I see myself as one of them, and that we're friends. I think they see me as the leader, but it's not something that has to be established very much. Right. It's we love each other, we like each other, we have a common purpose of what we want to do,
Right.
and I think that's what we're united in. We're united in our scriptures first. We're united in the doctrine first, over and above our own relationships, because we're humans, so we're gonna at some point hurt each other.
Right.
But our willingness to have the harmony in our relationships or be brought back to a harmony or unity in our relationship is because the mission and the scriptures are first, and therefore we're going to submit to that and be brought back to a complete unity. I think that is a very important thing, and in groups I was part of before, it was the opposite.
Right.
It was the relationships first, and then the mission was going to be subjugated to those relationships. And you can never have good enough relationships to stay unified when the Bible is subject to it. What makes it lasting is that the relationships are subject to the Bible.
Right.
And that's what allows people to be brought to complete unity.
Wow. That's so useful, because here in Nigeria and most part of Africa, people generally don't want to speak up. Like, no, I'm not the one who's gonna spin it out. People are generally afraid. Just the culture and just the traditional values and all of that. So people mistake, tradition and respect for not speaking up. And so this culture actually gets carried into the church. And you could actually be seeing things in the church and not talking. You could see things in the life of your leaders and not being able to speak up. You can actually be in a place where spiritually you're dying, but just because you have someone there who is quote unquote the pastor or your leader, and because he says some things, you are willing to hang on to what they're saying rather than really looking onto what the Bible says and taking an action on it. What kind of advice would you like to give in such an environment?
Well, I think the church is God's ingenious invention and vessel for us to learn how to be like Jesus. And it goes from both sides of things.
Right.
For the follower, they need to learn how to have convictions and be open and honest, and at times that takes courage.
Right.
For the leader, they have to learn how to be humble and care about the mission and not their position,
Right.
and create a culture that makes it easier for people to be open and honest. It ultimately comes down to a leader, because they are going to build culture.
Right.
But the person following the leader is not a victim of it either. They have to have the willingness to say something.
Right.
And they can't be cowardly, and they have to, and I've had it many times, because I've led people and been led by people, and obviously I'm still in that to this day. And it's always hard to say something to somebody in authority.
Right.
It's always hard. It's never not going to be hard.
Right.
It's just the nature of humanity. I think we see this in the business world, but I think it's maybe even highlighted more in the church because spirituality and salvation and all these things come into play.
Right.
And I think also just as Christians, people want to be good-hearted. And so they don't want to be bitter, and they don't want to have a bad attitude, and they don't want to have bad things. And they have that preached at them a lot, which is not wrong.
Right.
But sometimes in the miscalculation of that, of trying not to be bitter or not have a bad heart, they can sigh on the air of cowardice,
Right.
of not saying things when they should say it.
Right.
So that's one side of it. I think the other side of it is that when you're a leader, you got to understand that this dynamic is naturally there.
Right.
It's naturally there. It doesn't take anything for it to be there.
Right.
You can have a family. It's always going to be hard for the son to talk to the dad about how he's feeling.
Right.
Right? It's there. It's a raw piece of humanity. So you have to try and counteract that with intentionally building a culture of friendship, of family, of conviction, where you empower people in a loving, respectful way,
Right.
but still an openness to share honest thoughts.
Right.
And be open to being wrong in that, on both sides.
Right.
And then have a love that's going to cover over the multitude of it, because there is no human organization where people are not going to wrong each other. They're not going to sin against each other.
Right.
And so there does have to be a healing. There does have to be a resistance towards bitterness. There does have to be a getting rid of that. But not at the cost of compromising your convictions. It shouldn't come at that. There has to be a willingness to stand for your convictions, particularly when they're foundational. Not a debatable matter or opinion matter, but of life and doctrine issues. You have to be willing to wade into those types of discussions. And then even on a personal level of feeling hurt or feeling, wronged, and be willing to go, okay, I don't want to do this. Many times I have to go, okay, I'm dreading having this talk, but I have to have the talk.
Right.
And I'd have times where I'd pray through it for days and make sure I got my mind in order and what I was going to say in order. But nevertheless, I had to have that discussion.
Right.
And I think this is the type of community we need to build in the church.
Right.
I think what ruins it is pride, insecurity, people trying to hold on to position, people being unchallengeable, people feeling that they're too important to be challenged, or feeling that their role came with an inability to be challenged in that way.
Right.
And it's come also at the cost of people under leaders being unwilling to be brave and convicted and loving enough to be honest and open. So I could say that we've worked very hard and want to impress upon all those who would raise up into leadership within the restored churches to work hard to build a culture of openness and friendship and cultivate that in their groups so that people feel that they have a platform to talk and be open and ultimately be unified.
Everybody gathers, risen together. It's a whole new reality. Connecting people,